Welcome back, everyone, to Open Line. Talking about a bill that will be voted on tomorrow in the Senate, in the state Senate, that is deals with voter registration drive. It would impact voter registration drives in the state. We have with us Charlane Oliver. She's board president with Equity Alliance. That's a group that tries to register lots of people to vote. And Debby Gould, vice president with the Tennessee League of Women Voters. Several people on the line, so let's go to the phones. Hello, Wayne. Are you there, Wayne?
Hello?
Hello, go right ahead.
Good evening. How you doing?
Doing well. What's on your mind?
Well, I hope I don't complicate things, but I'm going to make a statement and try to explain it briefly. The election process and voting is way outdated. I mean, you know, the good thing about it is that you have to stand in line to vote, and it hasn't gone digital. But what I'm trying to explain, there's so many loopholes, and then when you look at the process, and what really frustrates me is when the Tennessee Legislature, they complicate it by saying, okay, you know, this is how you can do it, and you know, it seems like the legislator would have better things to consider, like what's best for the state. But just to put it briefly, the process is outdated, and one thing I never understood is when you vote on a state level, they go by the popular vote. And when it's a national election, they have, the electoral.
Right.
So like I said, we've been doing this for so long that now it's getting to the point to where, it's comical.
So are you opposed to this? You're opposed to what they're talking about, or are you supportive of it?
Well, I think the Tennessee legislature have better things to consider, but I'm saying they need to consider overhauling the entire voting process. In other words, don't just throw a monkey wrench in and make it complicated. They need to look it over and come up with a better system.
All right. Wayne, thank you. What do you think of that? League of Women Voters, what do you think?
Well, I would say that one of the things that we really do applaud the Secretary of State for was getting online voter registration. That's a real exciting improvement, that you no longer have to turn in a paper form, that you can actually go online and handle the voter registration form there, and it does have the advantage that you can't do it wrong. They won't, it's got you have to fill in the blanks correctly or you're not registered. So we think that's a real improvement, and I think that Wayne would be happy to hear that we've moved that into the 21st century on that.
There are some advancements. Do you have a thought about what he's saying?
Yeah, sure. I agree with Wayne. Yes, online voter registration is great. That's one step that we've taken to move us in the 21st century. Paper forms actually may not even be needed. That's something that has been an ancient way of doing things before we had computers. So now that we do, we have automatic voter registration would even take it a step further to even eliminate the need for this legislation where we're talking about incomplete forms. The DMV collects all the information that you need to register to vote. If we had that opt-in clause to have automatic voter registration or same-day registration, that would solve some problems as well.
Interesting. Let's go to Taylor. Hello, Taylor.
Good evening, Ben, and good evening to your guest. I totally support this this legislation, because I've done registration drives, and the lady talking about suppressing votes, you go to total computer registration, and you will hear some squealing out of everybody. Oh, I'm too old, I don't know computers, this, that, and the other. But let me say this. If you're going to go out and register people to vote, it's not that complicated to fill out the form. It takes not much more information on a voter registration than it does to fill out a little form to win a free bicycle at a contest of some sort. You can't register people by just throwing a bunch of pieces of paper out on a table with a mass around you and expect to have the information. These election officers try their very best. And it's rather insulting when I hear that it's people that are out to suppress the vote. But if you don't know what county you live in, you probably don't need to be voting anyway. But it's such a minimum amount of information. And the only thing extra might be from the free lottery thing I mentioned would be your birth date, the county you live in, and that's about all. But your
Sounds
name,
like, yeah,
your address, the county, and it's not right to put everything on the registration office or this. We prize our voting. We prize this. We prize this. But everybody wants to skip any of the responsibility that goes with it. And that's registration and having the right addresses. Thank you very much.
Taylor, thanks for the call. So there you hear somebody who says this is a good idea. We're not asking too much of people to fill out the form right. You know, what do you say to what Taylor's saying there?
Well, one of the things that we know, for example, on this form is that it asks for the last address where you were registered to vote. Well, for some people that's really easy. For some people who may not have voted in the last 3 or 4 years, they're thinking, I don't remember which apartment I lived in then. You could actually, that's not one of the essential pieces, but it is part of the form. It's part that they do ask for, and so sometimes people are unnerved by that and they think, well, I'm going to put this aside because I don't know the answer, and that's not what we want. So again, I agree with the caller that it's not extraordinary information if you have access to all of it, but we often find that what's easy for some people is a little more complicated for others. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I would also offer this information to the caller when he says it's just not that hard to fill out the form. We did some digging in some state records with the last voter registration numbers from the November 2016 presidential election to the November 2018 midterm. In that 2-year period, only 50.8% of statewide forms resulted in a valid voter registration. This is not anything of a voter registration drive. This is just people turning in forms to their election commission to register.
So in that period, only about half of the forms were filled out correctly?
One and two.
Good grief.
So when we talk about it's just not that difficult, well, apparently it is, because 1 in 2 people can't fill out the form right.
Yeah. Right, and what normally happens is whenever it's possible that an election commission, as part of their job, is they follow up and they try and they contact the person and find the information, and which is why there's that time period before the election where they can confirm that information, or else people can come in and vote provisionally and then confirm it then.
The other thing Taylor is saying is we can't just overburden these election officials. What about that?
Well, let's consider we are consistently in the bottom 5 of all states in voter participation. In 2014, we ranked 50th in voter turnout. We're already at the bottom. So a lot of people are not participating in our elections. So let's just say we had, we were number 1 in voter turnout. People just wanted to actually go vote. What are they going to say then? That we have this massive surge of people that want to all of a sudden participate. I just don't understand how we can't. We're taking a negative approach to participating in our elections. We should be encouraging people to register to vote. We should be encouraging people to vote, not making it harder. And this bill makes it absolutely harder for that, because they're imposing so many different hurdles on groups that are actually helping them do their jobs. So we want to help the Election Commission. We have an interest in stake in making sure that people get the right to vote.
What do you have something to add?
No,
there?
I definitely agree, and we're 45th right now as a state in terms of voter registration rates. So obviously, whatever we need to do, however many groups participate to get the rates up, would be good for all of us.
Let's go to Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
Go right ahead.
Thank you for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I had I had heard earlier that your guests said they or their organization had compensated people for registering to vote, and I'm just curious as to the level of compensation. At what price are you compensating them from the lowest to the highest, and what forms do we out here that have already registered, how can we fill out a form and be compensated for us registered in the past?
I think he misunderstood and thought it was that you were paying people to register to vote rather than the people who were actually going out and handing out forms.
Oh, okay. Let me clarify. So, as part of this project, first of all, we are a 100% volunteer organization. We don't have any paid staff, first of all. So, we rely on people to go out and do this work for us. We have to rely on grants, and that as a nonprofit, most nonprofits rely on grants to pay their staff. So we were using grant money to compensate contract workers, to organize this project, to coordinate the project, and then hire organizers to actually go out and register people. So we were compensating in an honest way for their work. This is 91,000 voters. That takes that's a full-time job. We should be compensating people for that effort.
You're paying people to go out and ask someone to fill out a form, but you're not paying the person who fills out a form. It's not like if you fill out this form, we'll give you $10.
No, sir. That's actually illegal.
Yeah, so that's not what's happening.
No, we were not paying people per quota. We were not paying people to say go out and get X number of forms registered. We were not paying people to register to vote. You can't do that.
You're paying people who work an hourly wage.
They were paid an hourly wage for that, a stipend.
To stand in front of a supermarket or whatever. They're working.
Right.
Okay, Joe, I appreciate the question because that clarifies it. Thank you for the question. Let's go to Jack. Hello, Jack.
Yeah, I'm really kind of amused by the question, is this voter suppression? Anybody who's been paying attention to politics in America since the year 2000 knows that the Republicans, and I'm an independent, so I don't have a particular affinity for either party, have been running active voter suppression campaigns across the country. And pretty much every state that is run by the Republicans has participated at various times in these efforts to suppress the vote. And anybody who doesn't think that's true must be drinking Kool-Aid spiked with vodka on the back porch with their eyes closed and earplugs in their ears. So I don't really see how one can say this is not what it is, because clearly it is exactly what it is.
So you believe this is voter suppression? I mean, I know the state election officials would say it's not voter suppression. They would say,
of course they would.
They're overwhelmed and people have a responsibility to fill these things out properly. And
excuses are a dime a dozen. Even if it's simply intimidation of people that they might gain a penalty if they don't do it right, that is in and of itself an intent to suppress registration.
All right.
They could put whatever excuses out that they want. It doesn't mean I'm going to believe them. They're politicians after all. And again, Democrats or Republicans, it doesn't matter to me. When I lived in Chicago, the Democrats were manipulating the vote regularly. But that's exactly what's going on. And anybody who doesn't think that's true, like I said, is being dishonest, in my opinion.
All right. Jack, thank you very much. So Jack just goes right at it. He says this is voter suppression, period. Representing the League of Women Voters, does the League of Women Voters believe this bill is voter suppression?
Whether it is intentional or unintentional, it creates a chilling effect. Just this week, I had a volunteer organization, not the League, another organization that called me and said, we're having an event this spring and we're nervous about what our volunteers can and can't do. And so, you know, it wasn't that they were going to do anything wrong, but they were already worried. And that's not the impact that we want to have. We don't want people to unintentionally just say, okay, this is not for me, I'm not ready to take this liability on. And that would be the worst thing possible for our state.
And before we go to break, I'll let you respond as well. He's saying it's a no-brainer. This is voter suppression. Do you think that is the intent of this? Or do you think, again, they're overwhelmed and they're just trying to reform things because they got slammed in the last election?
Yes, this is voter suppression. We have been doing, as the League of Women Voters said, voter registration drives for decades. All of a sudden, now we have the most successful effort to register people of color in this state. 6 months later, we have this bill to make sure that we can stop people of color from registering to vote. This is voter suppression. They are targeting organizations that help people of color and poor people register to vote. That is who they don't want to vote. So yes, this is voter suppression, if this law passes, not only is it going to have an effect on organizations like mine who go into communities of color, it's going to have an effect on organizations like the League of Women Voters, and it's going to create intimidation for people that don't want to have anything to do with criminal penalties.
So, all right, I know we have to go to break. I'm going to ask this question, then we'll go to break. If this had been in effect in the last election, when you turned in all those names, assuming you would have turned in all of those names, and assuming there would have been more than 100 that were filled out incorrectly, what would have happened? Like, would you have been fined? Would you be? What would be the penalties? What would it do to your organization if you had done just what you did in this last election?
Well, first of all, we had an internal quality control process to make sure, and we separated out the incomplete forms from the complete forms. So we actually wouldn't have been fined because we would have made sure that we adhered to the incomplete guidelines. Again, we were giving guidance that we followed, saying to turn in incomplete forms. So if the law had been in place, we would have had the guidance to follow, and we actually probably would have had 100% accurate rate. But
okay.
Yeah. So,
but you worry it would still chill other organizations, make them not want to do it.
And actually, and I think Charlane and I would agree on this, that we would love to have guidelines for volunteers that the Election Commission created. We just think it should be voluntary rather than this is a really heavy hammer to put over us that we don't need. We would much rather cooperate.
All right, we'll take a break. We'll take more calls. A couple lines open if you want to call in. There's the number 615-737-PLUS. 615-737-7587. Take a break. Be back right after this.